expensive technology, high voltage batteries, excessive use of plastic, expensive shop rates, tiny little engines with turbochargers on them are all part of a growing trend by car manufacturers now producing vehicles that are more fuel efficient, more powerful, more complex, and more expensive to service with smaller engines that clearly are going to cost you dearly in the long run, and likely very few of them will last significantly past the warranty period. I'm going to share a list of 5 of the main reasons why modern day vehicles simply aren't built to last. Let's get into it now.
Life's too short to drive boring cars.
The first reason why these vehicles aren't built to last any longer, and they're clearly going to get nothing but expensive as you own them, you're definitely going to want to turf them, is something to do with this. What are we looking at here? This is a cooling system pipe from a modern day car. In a lot of these vehicles, obviously you have these plastic ends, these keyed fittings, they snap together. They're wonderful when they're brand new, and when you buy them out of the box, snap, snap, and they're great in the factory. But guess what? They're junk when it comes time to replace. And unfortunately, the heating cycles causes those plastic parts to expand and contract and constantly cause all kinds of swelling, and then eventually they leak. And how is that a problem? Well, they clearly don't last as long as an old conventional hose and a metal clamp that's built to last a long time. Where car manufacturers we've seen like Toyota and Lexus are still using the old-fashioned rubber hose with an all-tension spring around it that's metal and built to last as long as physically possible. A lot of these manufacturers are clearly now selecting to use these quick snap together fittings, which A, they're hugely expensive when it comes time to replace because the parts are expensive, and of course the labor often goes with it, and B, of course, generally they just simply don't last. They're not the quality parts that we once knew and loved. And when you look around all under the hood of modern day vehicles, there's nothing but plastic. Plastic, plastic, plastic. Of course, the shroud's not a big deal, but when you look at parts like this, it should never have this kind of slop. Granted, there's play in there, but you'll notice there's a little bit of give on everything. And very little of this vehicle now is made of actual metal. And how is that a problem? Well, good old-fashioned steel, other than corrosion, it generally lasts forever. But unfortunately, as you get into the use of plastics, all that heating under the engine starts to cause all kinds of deterioration, heat cycles, cool cycles, heat cycles, cool cycles. And the plastic starts to get brittle, cracks, split, swells, and it's just not good. It's not built to last. Now, it doesn't matter to have plastic in a part like this. This is just a cover. This is just a cover. But when we're starting to see a lot more engine components that are made of plastic, you've got covers there, you've got all kinds of other housings and components like this that are plastic, and plastic parts in areas like this, and a lot of those are generally very close to turbochargers. And in this case, many of these modern day vehicles are turbocharged right now, and that unfortunately creates a lot of extra heat, and it starts imposing itself on plastics in the near vicinity. You also have all kinds of sheaths like this with your wiring harnesses attached to it close to turbochargers, and those can lead to premature failures. And not just can they do. It's the overextended use of plastics under the hood, and every single part saves the manufacturer money, but it costs you more in the long run. The parts don't last as long. Most of those hoses and pipes are just like the water pumps now, with plastic housings, plastic impellers, and most of those parts are really only good for 50, 60, 70,000 miles, and then you're in the shop paying that $200 an hour shop rate to get a mechanic to fix it, because quite often they're buried in places that make it very difficult for the home do-it-yourselfer to take care of. So this massive use of plastics in today's modern day vehicles are going to be the demise of a lot of these cars. And sadly, if you want to keep it running, which you can, it just means you're going to be pouring out thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in service every 80,000, 70, 60,000 miles, and you're just continually going to be pouring money down the proverbial money pit. The second reason comes down to what's down here. Engines. Engines have gone through such an evolution. Gone are the days of a naturally aspirated V8 that just makes good torque, power, reliability. Now they're being replaced with twin turbo V6s. Unfortunately now, the old V6 engines, like you used to find in a C-Class Benz or any other car nowadays, or inline sixes, for example, a lot of BMWs were creating a great inline six engine. They were now replaced with a turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. A lot of turbo 4s are making it to the front, and even turbocharged 3-cylinder engines are being put under the hood. Now, it's not just the engines are less reliable, they're more complicated, they create more heat, and they're working twice as hard. And that's a big reason why they're not going to last as long as their older school versions. As an example, this Mercedes-Benz used to come in the older C-Class with a V6 engine. Now it comes with this 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, and it does happen to make about 250 horsepower. So it makes comparable power, comparable performance, but of course it does it with a slightly better improved fuel economy. And that's a big reason why his emissions and fuel economy ratings are all part of this big EPA push, as well as government regulators are pushing people into these types of vehicles much more frequently and making some of the more tried and true and reliable drivetrains go away, sadly enough. But in the meantime, those turbos that you'll find in most of these engines nowadays create extra heat, which melts plastics around them. Of course, it creates all this extra heat within, and naturally there's a higher demand for more excessive oil changes. You need to up your oil change intervals, or tighten them up, if you will. In other words, do them much more frequently than you ever did with some of your old naturally aspirated engines that you could literally neglect. You could drive them forever, you know, 5, 10, 20,000 kilometers on some of the old Chevy 350 cubic inch engines, and they would just keep running. But these engines are too sensitive, too high strung, and too dependent on the perfect amount of treatment. If you don't do that, you use it, you abuse it, that engine's going to deteriorate extremely quickly. And the worst part is a lot of manufacturers now aren't just throwing turbos and a 2-liter engine in there. Even, for example, Ford on the EcoSport, they have that small little turbocharged 3-cylinder engine. Now they're using cutting corners in other places. Oil pumps that supply all of the healthy fluids to keep the engine lubricated, the variable valve timing in most cases, turbocharging, cooling, and lubrication. Oil is critical. It's the lifeblood of any engine. But Ford goes, in all of their infinite wisdom, buries the oil pump in a bath of oil, and top of it, they use a belt instead of a set of gears to drive that pump. The belt breaks, lo and behold, there's been many cases of those engines catastrophically failing. So engines are created much more tightly wound these days, with shortcuts that unfortunately are going to challenge the ultimate in reliability that we always used to know and love in some of the older school drivetrains. Now you can expect and anticipate engines like this, 2-liter turbo 4s. And unfortunately, even this one doesn't have it. Many of the new versions of this vehicle now come with a little hybrid assist. So the sheer complexity is just going to add to the cost at the end of the day. And while it's under warranty, it's all lovely. It drives great, it performs well, it's economical, it's quiet, and it's powerful. It's great. But unfortunately, wait till 3, 4, 5 years rolls down and then start paying the piper once some of those big repair bills come in. Not only that, instead of doing your oil changes every 15,000 kilometers, or about 10,000 miles, you realistically have to drop that down to 5,000 or 8,000 miles if you want to try to keep that engine in one piece. They're highly strung and clearly going to cost you a fortune to keep on the road. Modern day cars have so much added technology. Sure, while LEDs don't draw a lot of power, a lot of the other technology comes in the way of sunroofs, power features like windows and mirrors, and all of the other electronics takes power, and power is driven by batteries. So this here, as we lift right there, you'll notice there's a battery as a connection, and there's a battery buried way down deep in there. Well, let's close that for now. But this is a big part of the problem with modern day vehicles, is the overuse of batteries. Larger batteries, more complex batteries, more expensive batteries. I mean, even this vehicle here is pre-hybrid. This one does not have the hybrid assist. It has a garden variety battery that from the dealership, this cost us $600 for that battery. But there's a second battery. That's right. So when you remove that, it doesn't remove all of its brains. It doesn't lose all of the settings and all of the other extras. It allows you some of the features that would operate, not necessarily crank the engine, but it allows some of the electronics and the memory to stay intact. 2 batteries at a significant cost. But nowadays you also have hybrid batteries. In most cases, almost every vehicle now comes in a hybrid format. Those batteries are going to cost you money. I was looking at an older generation Civic hybrid the other day, and then I started Googling it because I was thinking about buying it, and then I realized it could cost as much as $5,000, $6,000, or $7,000. And I thought, why? Keep it simple. Why now all of a sudden I'm looking at this 10-year-old, 15-year-old Civic that actually needs batteries because it says every 10 years you need to replace them for this hybrid at the tune of $5,000, $6,000? No thanks. Keep it simple. good old-fashioned naturally aspirated engine by Honda, I kept looking, my search was over. Unfortunately now, with the evolution of every other car manufacturer creating hybrid vehicles, or the transition into EVs, means the depreciation is going to crush those vehicles more, because for that exact reason, who's going to want to buy your car when it's right at that time that it needs a battery swap? Also, if you're the unlucky soul, you bought that car new, you kept it for 8 years and the battery's declining outside of warranty, lo and behold, you're on the hook for thousands of dollars. We hear the horror stories. The pure EVs too are a drastic nightmare for a lot of people, having to spend $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 to get their battery swapped out. Sure, I know there's recycle facilities, there's companies that know how to refurbish them, make them better, but it's still costing thousands of dollars out of your pocket if it's outside of warranty. And eventually it's outside of warranty. There will be a time. Sure, some manufacturers are giving you 8 years, some 10 years, some 5 years. The bottom line is though, at some point, that vehicle will run out of battery life and you're going to be stuck on the hook paying thousands of dollars for that battery replacement. The next reason why a lot of these vehicles aren't going to last much outside of warranty is the sheer complexity of a lot of these modern day vehicles. People are asking for this technology. People want this technology. But wait a minute, when warranty's gone, you don't want any part of that. Why? Well, for example, you've got power seat controls like this. This allows you to give the seat movement like this. It's wonderful when it works. Of course, you get power everything here, power release. You get all kinds of heated functions here, cruise control, big screens, ABS as well right there. And when we hit this little button, you'll notice this just, lo and behold, opens nice and easily. Everything is controlled with power these days, and that's the problem. It's the sheer complexity, and they all have some sort of electrical system modules, in most cases, driving each and every one of those features. Whether you have a module to control this infotainment system, it's likely buried under the dash. You have power seat modules buried under the seats. You have all kinds of these controls here buried inside the dashboard. You have all of these other features like this all buried under seats, under this area here, or even in some cases in the front engine compartment, or even worse, in a lot of cases it's buried in the back trunk, definitely next to your spare tire. You start flipping up carpets and you're gonna find there's usually a few modules buried in there. But the key is when those modules fail, for example, all of a sudden your window stops working. It could be a regulator, it could be even a switch, but sometimes it's a module. And a lot of times they aren't that well put together, they're not well made, or in some cases they even just get subjected to water. I know BMWs many years ago were having water ingress issues in the trunk, and then some of those features would start to fail. They'd short out, wiring would get contaminated by the water, and then lo and behold, you had a short out in that module. It's only a $3,000 or $4,000 touch, but can you imagine you lose a couple modules, and with time and with age, it's like everything. It's no different than your cell phone like this. Your cell phones aren't made to last forever. You wind up with circuit boards that fry or cook, and it's all it takes is one little component within that mass abundance and web of electronics on board of that module, and that's all over but the crying. The simple fact is, people are looking for extra technology. They want safety features, they want luxury features, they want big screens, they want all of that technology, but when it comes time for longevity, it's just not there. It's not going to last as long as a lot of the older school vehicles that just used a basic set of switches and buttons and knobs, and they did away with all of these modern day electronics. But it's that reason, with all of these controls, electronics, technology, that's going to be cost prohibitive to keep these vehicles much beyond warranty. The worst part is when a vehicle runs out of warranty and you finally got some miles on it and you have to start replacing some parts. I'm looking here on a site that's a third-party site. They are actually a cost or vastly cheaper than the actual OEM parts. And you, whether you're buying a Honda, a Toyota, a BMW, or a Mercedes-Benz, the same principles apply. Now, shop rates are quite high in modern day vehicles. It's not uncommon to find $230, $240 an hour shop rate just to fix or diagnose a problem that you might have under the hood. The worst part is, a lot of these vehicles, they don't let you out. They basically say you have to sign on the dotted line acceptance that you have to pay the diagnostic fee, which often charges you about $250, $300 just to say, yeah, you have a problem. This is likely what it is. And they pretty much lock you in. But the worst part is, whether you're replacing components of, suspension parts, and I'm looking right here and I could see suspension parts, hundreds of dollars. I could see fuel pump parts, hundreds of dollars. Turbochargers. If you had to replace a turbocharger in a lot of these vehicles, you're talking, you know, a couple $1,000s, or even just a kit, or boost solenoids can cost you thousands of dollars in a lot of these vehicles. I'm looking at BMW here with some boost solenoid issues, and of course, where you've got control arm issues. As these cars age, the complexity of them with, you know, the AA arm suspensions, and they're just too expensive these days. They're great to drive when they're new, but they're made in a very lightweight fashion, and they just clearly don't have what it takes to last a long time. And if it was cheap, that'd be okay, but the problem is it's not cheap, it's not inexpensive. And so replacing parts under the hood often mean that you could spend couple $1,000s there. This might cost you $1,800. These hoses might cost you, a collection to re-hose the system might cost you about $3,000 at the dealer. This tank here costs $450. This battery $600 right here. Control arm set there is going to cost you about $800, $900. Brakes all the way around is going to cost you a couple grand. You get the gist? We won't even talk about having an issue here. Maybe your kid knocks the bike into that and breaks that. That's going to cost you $6,000 per side. Doesn't matter, again, whether it's a Benz or a Honda or a Toyota, they're all going to cost significant money outside of warranty. And that's largely in part due to the complexity of the parts, the extra sensors, the parts that are designed and machined tightly with tighter tolerances, made for efficiency, and generally everything's working much harder and tighter. Just overall, electronics, everything just adds dollars and cents. Shop rates are not getting cheaper. Cost of living crisis is catching up to everybody, and these shops are charging for it. They're paying their staff to keep them working, and in doing so, those costs get transferred down to you. So at the end of the day, the more complex the vehicle, as we're starting to see in 2024, 2025 and beyond, as we transition into the EV market, as well as even hybrids are becoming highly prevalent, and of course smaller engines with turbochargers mean they just generally won't last, and the costs are going to be cost prohibitive to own for the long term. And with all of that said, great video right there as to what's going on and how are these engines so unreliable these days that they're not lasting, as well as that, what's causing these engines to actually implode. Great videos. You're definitely going to want to get caught up. Hope to see each and every one in the next one. See you real soon. Bye-bye.